What's up, everybody? Talking today about a day one scrape. So, the big picture goal is just to get the reed in the ballpark. Just kind of needs to play. So, I've soaked this reed with the mandrel, forming mandrel, in there because often the back will swell up and it won't fit on your bocal when you go to test it. And this way, too, the wires aren't. But we need to soak it so the wires can get snug. So I'm already testing this wire. See a lot of movement there. So movement around the base, no good. Tighten that up. Okay, so now you see only the stem is moving. The base around the wire is not moving. So that's what you want. Some movement around the base. Pull and twist. Pull and twist. As you can see, I twisted about a 16th of a turn, not a lot. And I'll probably have to snug this down on day 2 as well. Okay, so got that. Only problem with soaking it on the mandrel pen, can't get it off. Hmm. I mean, I could obviously twist it off, but I'm afraid of really messing up the blade slippage. Trying to pull it off with as little twisting as possible. Going to just grab my little pair of pliers. Which are nowhere to be found. Guess if I really want to be fancy, I could edit this out, but that might be beyond my budget. Okay, so now I've got pliers with a crimping tool. I'll try to slide it up there. I don't really want to squeeze it right here. It's going to mess up the wrapping. I've wrapped this reed with beeswax, so it's not quite as strong. If it were hot glue, I would just grab it right here and rip it off. But with the beeswax, it's not quite as strong. It's not really going to hold up to that. There we go. There it is. So the water kind of will make it seal. But if you don't over soak it like I did, you'll be able to pull it right off. All right, moving on. Got the tip. I also notice I've got letters written here that are not marked. Okay, so I have DOI. And here I have OBG upside down. Should have done capital G. There we go. Okay. If I take my reeds to 28 millimeters on day 1, I don't really use this thing over here. I find it's kind of inaccurate at times. So I just use once I get close, I use my ruler. Okay, I'm at 29 and 3/4. Twenty-eight and a half. this point, I'm just kind of trying to go a little bit, remeasure it. 28 1/3. So with the thing closed, I push it up against that, lift it, and just inch it forward by feel. That's going to be it. 28 on the dot. Okay. Next thing I do is put in the tip, the very tip, sometimes called the tip bevel. I do this holding the reed backwards with a razor blade. Take about a 45-degree angle. Going back about 1 millimeter behind the tip. There we go. As you can see, not that complicated. Just a slight bevel. Other side. Be careful here as your razor blade gets dull like mine. You don't want to scoop. That's going to give you the wrong shape. You almost want the reverse of that. As you cut, lift the back of the blade to increase the angle. Okay. There's that. Now we just need to put in the collar. Here's another spot. You don't really want to dig with swooping motions. You more want to get it going with an angle, then come straight back. Just pull the blade straight back towards that collar. It's also an easy way to cut oneself, so I'm bracing it with my thumb here. I can only slip this far. I cannot slip all the way. If I hold it, with my fist, now there's nothing stopping me. I can slip all the way and cut my fingers. But here, as you can see if I zoom out, I've got it gripped right here with this thumb. So it's not going to slide any further than that thumb. I went a little too far. That's okay. Yeah, here's our collar. I'm also going to put in, just taking off the very edge. This will kind of cut your tongue, these very corners. You can see I did not take off much. Get that in the camera. Now, I will take my biggest file. This is a Grobet 00 6-inch file. And it is not a diamond file because this summer they added a Prop 65, which is the California Hazardous Material Warning. They added a Prop 65 warning to their diamond files because they apparently contain nickel. So nickel is a heavy metal that can be toxic to the human body, and we're probably not ingesting it, but you never know. All right, so this file is great for when it's just off the profiler and it's way too thick everywhere. Just kind of eyeballing it, but what am I eyeballing? So the first thing you want to get done on a day one is this right here, this number 1, which just says, does it go down? Okay, so right here, oops, that's not good. Here's my highlighter. Okay, does it go down? All this means is the rail actually thinner than the middle? Okay, and right now, it's not the case. With most new reeds, it's not the case. You have something like this, where the rail is 4 units thick and the center is 4 units thick. So that's not going to work. So that's basically what I'm roughing out. I'll also say, just knowing this profiler, I know the back is too thick. I can just see it. I can see it, the distance from the collar to the back. So I'm doing a little bit there. Right, so I'm working on that. At the same time, I'm working on this number 2, which is the diagonal and back to front tapers. Okay, so on this reed, you can see this yellow circle here in the middle of the reed. Some people call that the critical point. Some people call it the heart. My profiler and most profilers, especially ones without a center to side taper, are set up where this point is the most finished point. So then I'm going to taper from that point to the other ones. So you can see where I'm going to focus on a day 1 read, at least with my profile, probably these shaded regions, things like that, okay? And each of these lines is the point from which I want it to taper. What is a taper? It's this thing. It's an inflated curve. You don't want it to swoop like this one here. And if it's basically flat, that's also not a taper. Okay? So I'm working on all of those things kind of at once. This is what makes it complicated. And I'll admit too, a lot of it is by feel. When you've made hundreds of reeds, your brain just starts to see where cane needs to come off. So that's the first key, is make a bunch of reeds. Find a way where you can have a habit of making reeds so that it doesn't take your willpower to do it. It's just like brushing your teeth. But those are the big picture goals. As I scrape here, I'm focusing my efforts. Oops. Okay. Focusing my efforts in there. I have the file up at a slight angle. So it's just barely, it probably looks flat. I can see over the front edge. If I do this, now I can't see where I'm scraping. But I do have it up at an angle. And the more I want to cut, the more horizontally I scrape, and the less I want to cut, the more vertically I scrape. But again, that's not a conscious decision, it's more by feel. I've made many reeds. Look at this, the rail over here is still really thick. Not as thick as the other side, but still not in the ballpark. So this is getting into sort of this region. You know, if my rail over here is super, super thick, it probably means I don't have a good taper like this. It probably means I have this thing. Okay, which is sort of what we saw in the first picture. My rail is at 4. Don't be confused by the fact that, yes, it's lower than the spine, but you're really trying to understand it in relation to the curvature of the gouge. So because the gouge is curving, this thing isn't a taper. So just gonna do a little bit more over there. Again, picturing in my mind's eye. Does it taper over here or not? Now, another thing to be careful on, especially as you're working on the sides on a day 1 read, do not get up at a really steep angle like this. You can destroy the rail in 3 strokes. You know, it doesn't take much to destroy the rail at all. So as I work on the sides and the rail, I'm as flat as I can be. If I were any more flat, I'd be hitting the spine. So I'm not up here, but I'm somewhere right here. Just asking myself, does the reed go down? Does this region that I'm scraping right now go down from the middle? And the answer currently is no, so I'm scraping it. Somehow already made some thin spots. I don't know if this was me or the profile. But I'm going to avoid those spots. Sure if those are clear. So I've already got some thin spots. All of this is done without the dial indicator. Another interesting point. You can see the rail, there's some inflection point right there. The rail is just really thick behind that. So I've got a little more work to do. And when I get the plaque, as you can see, the plaque shifted over to the right. I can see that much better. This file is too big now. I'm trying to scrape a very precise region. Here I am using the file flat on the reed. There's no angle here. Okay. It looks like I'm scraping mostly vertically, but in my hand I can feel most of the friction is coming from little pushes that are horizontal. Allowing me to get more precise. And again, all I'm asking myself, oh come on, is this right here. Does the reed go down? Is the rail lower than the channel, lower than the spine? Okay. Now at the same time, again, let me mention again, save the rails, right? So you don't want to end up with this on day 1. This reed will be dark, stuffy, it won't have any dynamics. So be careful when you're working in these regions. You do want to have some cane left right here rather than nothing, okay? So watch out for that, but do make the reed go down. This is again why it's so difficult to do this on a day 1. It's a dichotomy. There's good stuff on both sides, and you need to find the point at which it balances. Or maybe I should say there's bad stuff on both sides, If you make it curve too much and you get rid of the rails too soon, your reed will be stuffy, dull, dark, and it'll die in a few days. But on the other hand, if you don't have enough taper, your reed will be spread and won't really play like a bassoon reed. It'll play like some kind of bagpipe reed or something. But all right, so you can see the contours here on this reed versus the side that I haven't worked on. So I'm going to do this side now, same thing. Probably fast forward through this. Here I'm actually lifted the other way. So I really want to just get the back. I don't want to get up here where the front of the file was. I just wanted to get back here. And again, I'm just using my eyes. A lot of this you can see. I can just see that this is too thick in relation to here. So I'm working on the right side and the left side. Right side, left side. Never flat right on the middle. Right side, left side. As I see fit, it's not formulaic. It's all in response to what your eyes see. Using the front edge of the file, slightly lifted, but not so much that I can't see what I'm doing, not this angle. Just a little bit of lift for more precision. This side either had a better profile or I didn't screw it up while I was talking. Because I don't have those issues where right here and here as much are over scraped. Left side of the spine, right side of the spine. Imagining pencil line down the middle, right side up to that line, left side away from the line. Checking the channel, I mean the rails, the sides again. They look okay. Yes, they look good. So now to me this satisfies sort of my initial goal of, does it go down? Yes. The diagonals taper. Did I save the rails? Yes. And then, so this fourth box here, certain profiles are going to make the channels the thinnest point. So throughout here will be quite thin. So it may be 90% finished in the channels. And what you're going to have to do then is actually taper away from that point and to that point. Okay, so this is a more difficult profile, I think, to work with. Tip profilers generally put this in because they'll give you the channels. This will make the read play very quickly, but I don't find it's optimal for my reads. I like to put as much channel in as I need later, though some people use this strategy because they know if they put channels in early, it's going to kill all the reads that aren't ultimately going to work, so they find it helps them weed out more reads, which makes sense. It's just not what I do. I tend to put the channels in later as I see what the read needs. Okay, so, but going back to this read now, we've got our basic stuff going, at least as far as my eye can tell. It's roughed out. Next thing I'm going to look at is the tip opening. So you'll notice tip's really thick still. You can see the thickness. So I could definitely do more with the razor blade and the tip bevel. It's also very open. So this is certainly not going to play. So let me take this down a little bit. And I could round the second wire. So you can see that close the tip slightly. But the second wire looks normal. So I could round this a ton, but that'd be throwing the read out of the ballpark. Again, one of our main goals is to get the read in the ballpark. So let me flatten the first wire. Get that tip closure down. All right, so that's closer to a normal tip opening. You want about 1 millimeter, I think. Let's see what this is right now. This is about 1 millimeter. So that's pretty good. I still don't think this is going to play, which makes me think that there's still too much cane either here in the middle. Again, this is the point that's more or less finished on my read, or the most finished of all the points. There's either too much here in the middle or there's too much here in the back sides. But let's play it and see what we come up with. All right, so the low notes don't respond at all. High notes respond quite well. That makes me think maybe the back is still too heavy. But it also just plays sharp and it's not very resonant. So that makes me think the tip might be too thick. The center of the tip here, where I was saying, I think is probably too thick. Standard. This point is set and this point is extra thick. So now I'm going to check it on my dial indicator. It's really checking my profile. I'm checking the first eighth back from the tip. Let's see if we can show this. So as you can see, I'm 1/8 back from the tip. These are eighths of an inch. And I'm at 20 thousandths of an inch. This is 5 over my finished measurement. Check a few more. Yes. So my whole tip of this reed is too thick. Checking the other side, same deal. And again, this point, either 3/8 or 2.5/8 back from the tip. That's more or less done. Let's say that point is 90% done, but in front of it is not done. So I've got some more work to do, and it was so far over my final goal that I'm going to bring out the big file again. again, we use the dial just to tell us how thick it is, but your eyes always dictate what you actually scrape. So the dial just helps me confirm there's not much taper from here down to there, and I want this to taper more. But now I'm using my eyes. I'm not just going off the dial. Never use the dial blindly. Never just paint by numbers. Always use it to help your eyes see something about the tapers. That's the best way to use it. The dial just helps you get it in the ballpark. It's not prescriptive. The way it plays is much more prescriptive. This reed plays as if the middle of the tip were too thick. So the dial just kind of confirmed that fact. If it responded really well and was really weak and was really vibrant, that would suggest that the middle of the tip is fine. And in that case, I don't care what the dial says, I'm not going to scrape this point. But because it did, the way it played suggested this point was too thick and the dial confirmed it, now we're scraping there based on what our eyes see. So again, that's the critical part. Only scrape if your eyes tell you, yes, that doesn't taper. Or yes, the taper could be better. Or more steep, or something like that. Eyes are always the final arbiter. So you can see I'm kind of scraping in a, what you might call a thumbnail pattern. I'm not trying to put in a thumbnail, certainly nothing fancy like that. I'm just trying to preserve that point that's about right here where it's already done. Okay, that was the big picture. Let me refine it. Let's get in here with the smaller file. Already can see a lot more. Should I get that big file out of the way? But that saved me some time, no doubt. Looking better. Okay. Definitely got a little bit more taper in our tip. Look at the tip opening. It's getting a little thinner. Still closes all at once, which is probably a sign that there's too much cane through here, through what you might call the channels, but really just the sides. But before we do anything else, let's test whether or not we were doing the right scrape. Definitely responds better. But now what jumps out to my ear is it feels very sharp. Let's find out. Right. So the reed, it's better, but it just kind of plays barky. It just kind of barks at you. It's very harsh. Makes me think maybe the sides are too thick. I'm gonna check the very back. It's right at 35, which is where I like to start on day one. 36, 35, right in there. Okay, this back is actually at 40. So I've got some work to do back there. And because the tip still closes all at once, that makes me think the sides of the reed, anything sort of outside of the spine, something like that. All of this out here is perhaps too thick because, yeah, we've just got a lot. Is that in the picture? You see this? Okay. So just based on how that plays, that's what I'm thinking. Get all, well, first let me get the back, because the back was still too thick. Again, using my eyes. After the dial suggested that it was too thick. I mean, the reed plays like it's too thick. And then the dial said it's thicker than my model, than my sort of framework I'm working within. And now my eyes are the final decision maker. Oh yeah, it looks thick. Okay, great. Left side, right side. When I turned it at this angle, this doesn't taper at all. So that line is nowhere near going downhill. Whoops, that's not right. This. So remember this right here. The line I just drew, as you can see right here, it doesn't do this. It just does this. So it doesn't taper yet. And as I put that in, it's actually about right like that. As I scrape right in here, the reed will now be three-dimensional. You know, I'll have a middle and a three-dimensional being right here. I have a middle and a side, and they will exist in this vertical plane, spine, channel, rail, in this plane rather than horizontal. So let me put that in. And I can only see this when I turn the reed at the side. I couldn't see it from head on. It looks good head on. And here it doesn't look as good. On this other side, the reed just doesn't go down yet. The sides don't go down from the middle. Sides are just a big toothpick with no tapers. So you have to make it into a reed, which is more like a airplane with nice tapers. Imagine the spine is a cockpit in the airplane and it's higher up than the sides. Check that same spot here. Looks better on this blade. A little bit right there. That doesn't taper from here. And as you can see, having tried to not scrape the rails at all, they are gradually getting thinner. So that will happen naturally as you put the tapers in. That's why we do everything to preserve them. You never want to go up here and intentionally scrape them. Try to leave the rails as much as you can. Took off some good cane again. Tip still closes all at once. Let me try to massage it and get the corners to close down first. When I feel it, the back still feels very hard just between my fingers. Okay, so let's give it a shot. Still feels sharp. I'm gonna set this thing to not lock so often. Okay. You hear how that A sticks out as sharp in the scale? So all the sharp notes are still sharp. All right, I've got two theories as to what is causing that. So for some reason now, it just feels like the tip is still not refined enough. It's too thick. The other thing is this reed right now is relatively flat in the blade. As you can see, this blade is much more rounded. This finished reed on the right, the blade is much more rounded. Well, not really finished, but it's probably day 3. So that wider blade is just going to make things spread and not hold the pitch down. You really want the pitch to be held down, and that is held down by sort of strength, structural strength in the reed. So I'm going to actually round this, even though the tip is fine. So I have a feeling with a little more curved blade, I'm going to be able to see the tapers better. And this, we had to flatten this so much in order to make the tip a better size closure. But really that was masking this tip opening being too open is a problem somewhere else. So the fact that it's too thick somewhere else was causing that. It wasn't a function of the first wire needing to be flatter, if that makes sense. So it just feels like the tip, though, just doesn't work yet. And again, that's probably 90% gut. And if I had to justify it, I would say, well, the low notes still don't really respond, and they don't hold the pitch. So that's putting me to look at the tip. Now I am going to switch to a file that contains heavy metals because it just scrapes better. I'm going to rinse the reed off. So this is now a Grobe diamond file. I'd say medium to rough. Probably 4-inch Grobe diamond file. You can see compared to the large 6-inch file. This is really going to let me refine the tip. Just making sure everything tapers. I'm using the front edge again of the file. When I get to the corner, I'm scraping very lightly. Again, all of this is by sight. I'll notice, oh, something right there is too thick. You gotta just hold the final product in your mind's eye. And then your body will know where to scrape. Okay. It's now much more refined. I'm going to thoroughly wash off the heavy metals. Let's look at the tip now. Okay, still way too open. It's just not going to play. It's not going to play easily. So, and that's our goal on day one. Just get the thing in the ballpark. It's not yet in the ballpark. Too many people accept this state. So I'm going to let me look at the dial one more time. No longer too thick down the middle. Sort of right in line, a few measurements over where I want it to be. So I want to save room in the middle. It's always nice to be able to scrape the middle when you need to free the reed up or brighten it up or lower the pitch. Just checking, making sure everything's in the ballpark. And this one was not. So based on what the dial's telling me, this back is too thick. They look the same to me, but this one's actually about 4/1000th thicker than the other side. So I'm going to take that down. Now, is that going to fully address sort of the barkiness and harshness in the reed? Not really. But being the appropriate thickness will definitely make the reed less hard. Appropriate thickness for day one, I'll say as well. Because I'm not going to finish this spot. I'm going to take it down to the minimum. I'm just going to try to get it in the ballpark. Somehow I must have missed this spot when I scraped, probably because I was talking. And so now dial's helping me just identify what points down the middle of the reed are out of whack. And now that that's in place, really got to ask ourselves, don't have much architecture here. So that should be the spine. And if I draw lines here to there, here to there, here to there, the end points do not taper from the starting points. So just got to still do more on that side. It's just not yet a reed, even though in some ways it looks good. You know, it really needs to curve from the middle down to the side. And right now, it just juts out here like a plank, you know, so we've got just sort of a jut rather than a curve. Okay, so let me get that going here. Be very careful not to do this. Scraping the side or the rail from the top. Just want to take off the top. It's better. Is it finished? No, but it's better. Being extra careful because it's easy to go too far with this big file. Actually, I'm going to switch over to this file, a little more accurate. So what I'm scraping is essentially this little rectangle. I'm scraping that from the top, not from the side, not from the middle, but from right on top of that, as flat as I can be. I'm scraping that little box. This doesn't taper from here. So you just keep combing over the reed with your eyes, noticing things that don't taper. Noticing things that don't go down. Right now, here to here just doesn't go down. This is just as thick as here. So that's not a taper. Okay. Just pushing the cane out of the way. Again, constantly checking, making sure I've still got some good rail over there. I'm not going too far on the rail. It's not really the rail I'm scraping. I mean, it depends on your terminology, but I think of it more as I'm scraping the side, making sure I have a 3D read where the middle goes down to the sides with as much rail, calling this view, this little, how thick that is, that's what I'm calling the rail. I want as much rail as I can, but I still need the middle to go down towards the sides. Same problem over here. And let me say again, if this read played without that barky, hard to respond quality, if it played without that, I wouldn't be doing this. It's all based on how the read plays. But the way that plays is suggesting to me that this region, the sides, the channel, if you want to call it that, are too thick for the middle. So I'm putting these in proportion. And it's important to do this. A lot of people don't do all this on day one. They'll perhaps finish the tip even more. We could make this read work much better by over scraping the tip. But that would just sort of leave this problem back here unaddressed. So that's the biggest mistake I see people make, is they'll overfinish different parts of the read to compensate rather than really seeing what the main problem is. Okay, now we're finally getting some closure that's not all at once. You can see the tip opening is a little more diamondy, not quite so much of a hamburger, but more of a diamond. And let's see how this plays now. Better, but same issues. All right, so it still doesn't respond really in the low register. Part of that is probably because, again, if you look at this tip opening, there's a lot of opening over here. I still think we've got too much in the channel somewhere. The read just is not compliant enough. Let's see, where might that be? Now, as you can see, it's already too flat, but I think as I get it more balanced, more in the ballpark, if I blow with the same amount of air, the pitch will actually be higher. Just because the reed will play much easier. Okay, so the actual pitch will keep going down. Whenever you take off cane, the sort of ultimate pitch of the reed is going down, but sometimes the playing pitch can actually go up. Because if the reed is more compliant, it will blow up to pitch with less effort than before. Okay, so I'm hoping that's what happens here, but really, if it's 10 cents flat, I'm okay with that. I just want it to play normally. Right now, it does not play normally. So again, I'm just looking at the tapers, asking myself, are these 3 lines at different heights, or are they all at the same height? Are they all in sort of a horizontal plane, or are they in this vertical plane here? Are they all flat in this horizontal plane? So as I look at it, what you might call the channel, the line that corresponds to the channels, it's not really much lower than the middle. So it's not a taper. And as I scrape the channel area, I make sure that taper extends all the way. Yeah, it's just not, it just doesn't taper yet. Here, up here, there's actually too much out of the channel. So I'm getting over here to pop that line up again. Sort of like if you had one of those tip profiled reeds or a profile that takes a lot out of the channels and you need to taper to this point and then away from that point. This reed just doesn't work yet. You gotta just keep going until you've gotten it in the ballpark. Now at some point, I'm just going to give up on this reed and say, well, it's a strange day 1 reed. And hopefully, as it sits now with the tip cut, it will age into something more normal. But, as you can see, the tip, we're still working on it. Still feels too hard. I don't use the crow too much. Just sort of a gauge of how easy the reed is to play. But let's try this now. So as you can hear, it doesn't quite taper yet, but it finally plays normally. I'm not having to force it to play. Now the low register doesn't play just yet, but that may just be a principle or a property of this cane. So maybe nothing I can do about that. Maybe ever. It may always just be better at high notes. But now the middle, I can just play mezzo piano and I don't have to blast my air. And so we're in the ballpark. That's sharp, it's not great, it's not the most responsive, but it's in the ballpark. So the sound is very bright, it's very spread, and the reed still feels heavy, but I've gotten it now in the ballpark, and so, that's something for day 1. I'm going to note that it's spread, heavy, not great in the low register, and hopefully on day 2, the reed will have changed a little bit and there will be more opportunities to work on it. Okay, so that's my day 1. Try this stuff out. Let me know how it works for you.